And we're back with our last video, I hope. Working on Muckle Chapter 9. We're going to do Chapter 10 as well here during this week after Easter. Remember, we're trying to catch back up to get our week back that we lost there. Language in the digital age. We have digital language, language variety that is derived from electronically mediated communication since the wonderful texting revolution. This has really changed the way people communicate, and it's just wonderful. It's a new way of communicating, and we're very interested in studying texting and fingered speech, emojis, acronyms, etc. Ways to put emotion back into the written word. It's just wonderful. Language change and language loss. Remember, languages are always changing. We have a thing called a lingua franca. This is a common language understood by both individuals. I had my grandma had a friend once who was Armenian. She wasn't really from Armenia. She was really Bulgarian, really grown up in Bulgaria. But then she moved. I think she married an Armenian guy from Armenia, which is in sort of the Caucasus, but spent a lot of time in Lebanon, what is today Lebanon. She was in her 80s back in the 80s, so this was this was way back. Um, Goodness, I gotta get a map up here. Armenia. Oh wow. Okay, so Armenia is next to Azerbaijan and Georgia and the Caucasus Mountains in between what used to be the Soviet Union and what is today Turkey/Iran. Um, Russia's on the other side. Okay, and she was from somewhere around in here, but she had married a guy from here, wherever they were living, and then they ended up as refugees in Lebanon. And so she's in her 80s. I think it was in the 90s. I was visiting my grandma, and my grandma's other friend, who was Greek, had her ancient auntie from Greece. Uh, and they're trying to communicate. This one doesn't speak any English. The Greek woman was just visiting, and the Armenian lady, of course, speaks Arabic, and she speaks Armenian. She speaks English, but uh, the Greek lady didn't speak Armenian or English or Arabic, but what she could speak was Turkish. And Turkey, of course, is the country that was oppressing both the Greeks and the Armenians on either side. But it was a lingua franca for both of them. They both understood the language of the oppressor, and so she could speak Turkish too. This visiting friend from Greece, and the lady understood because she had grown up in Turkey. There's just a lot of terrible history behind that, but it's fun. To see them speaking. Pidgin, in the absence of a lingua franca, a pidgin is a limited speech variety that uses a dominant language as vocabulary and the subordinate language as syntax. When we had people, basically Portugal ruled from the 1500s, ruled the entire Indian Ocean. And so they would start out from Portugal with, these are ocean sailing vessels that require a lot of human power to do it, and you're off to sea for months on end, and there's not good food, and there's a lot of violence and a lot of illness, and nobody wants to do it, so they basically hit people over the head in Portugal and throw them on the boat, and when they wake up, they're already 12 hours out from port, and so now you're in the crew, kidnapped basically. This was a rough time. You're kidnapped and you got to work your way, and so you work your way down the coast, and they're staying off the coast, and then all of a sudden they put in Angola, and boom, everyone who can swim jumps over the side, who's not hit on the head again, and swims to the coast, and so then they go into Angola or into South Africa or into Mozambique or Kenya or wherever along the way, getting down to Indonesia. If 30 people jump ship, then you got to get 30 more, hit them over the head here, toss them on the ship, and then they'll have on the job training, basically all the way to Indonesia. And so what happens then is you got to have simple commands: pull that rope and then push that thing and then run over there and do that to the sail. And so you have to have these words to communicate with them, but they're from dozens of different languages along the way. But what happens is you develop a pidgin, a sort of a half Portuguese, half English, or half French, half Spanish, or whatever language of the ship's the bosses who are giving the orders, and that people pick up. So that's where it comes from, the pidgin language. Eventually, sometimes these turn into independent languages. Sometimes they turn into creoles, a new language derived from two previous languages after several generations. Various recognized languages began as pidgins and creoles. English itself is a creole of French and German. We know this because we today, when we look at the animal out in the field, we call it a pig. But when we look at the meat on the shelf, we call it pork. Or swine, sometimes we call it swine out there in the field. Some of them were German speakers and some of them were Celtic speakers as farmers. The farmers were Germans from Angleland and Saxony, right? Anglo-Saxons, and others were speaking more English, British languages, Celtic languages, etc., who were displaced by the incoming English in the 800s. But then in 1066, the French came in. Guillaume the Conqueror comes in. William the Conqueror from Normandy, which is France, and so the French were ruling. And so that's why you have, and the French, of course, speak a Latin language. So that's why you have a German word like chicken or maybe chicken is Celtic. I'm not sure where chicken comes from. Uh, Definitely cow is German, right? Cow. What's that out in the field? It's a cow or a sheep. Those are German words. But when you put it on the shelf as meat, when you're a rich person going to buy it in the store, you call it pork, porcus, right? That's Latin. You call it beef or boeuf, right? Which is français. French is boeuf. You buy what's sheep? Um, Sheep is mutton, mouton in French, mouton, right? Or poultry, poulet in French for chicken. So you can see that the buyer is speaking French and the seller is speaking German very often. Um, and so we mix them together and we come up with today's English. But after hundreds and hundreds of years, we have Haitian Creole, which is a language spoken in Haiti, which is related to French. Sierra Leonean Creole, which is related to various Sierra Leonean languages in English. Papua New Guinean Tok Pisin. Tok Pisin is a language spoken in Papua New Guinea that is related to English and various New Guinean languages. Colonialism. The U.S. government has never stopped immigrants from using any language they like. German, French, Yiddish, Arabic, and Chinese newspapers have been around for centuries in the United States. Centuries that we have seen German or Arabic newspapers being printed and sold in the streets of the U.S. cities. However, these countries were not colonized by the U.S., so we're free to speak our languages. My grandpa grew up in Missouri, born and raised in Missouri, but he didn't speak English until he went to school. He spoke German at home because his people were all in a German farming community and would still be speaking German today were it not for World War One, which came along in 1917. He was born in 1911. In 1917, he stopped speaking German and didn't speak it again, apart from talking to his elderly relatives who didn't speak very good English. And my dad never grew up speaking German at all because it was stamped out. It was a really bad thing due to war. But ordinarily, I mean, today if you go to Amish country, Holmes County, Ohio, the Amish people speak German. That's what they speak among themselves, and they speak English with an accent. And it's the same for most immigrant groups that didn't get assimilated after the 20s. We'll come to that. But Native American groups were singled out to have their languages exterminated. So Native Americans were being colonized by the United States, and that's why their languages had to be exterminated by official U.S. policy and in practice very, very brutally. Since the 1990s, numerous indigenous languages have been revived, including Miamia, an effort of the Miami tribe of Oklahoma, which Miami University officially and strongly supports. And if you dig around, you can find an entire verse of the alma mater in Miamia. Hopefully, this will become more and more common so that we can recognize our heritage as immigrant Americans, our heritage from Native Americans, and support them, support the people who actually have that heritage and share in it as much as they think is appropriate. Okay, that is Muckle chapter 9. I'm going to go on and start on 10 because we're trying to get through two of them this week.